Hi, people. Me again, of course. Moino Ravenberg is always and as usual. Yeah, I'm going to keep this really short. If you just look up, for example, will Russia attack Europe, for example, on YouTube, you're going to see a bunch of videos that essentially promote, bluntly put, fear mongering. Essentially, a good deal of people are afraid, including here where I am in Latvia. When I say it's more the OG people, essentially the elderly, etc., because the memory of Soviet occupation it still lingers freshly inside their minds. So you're seeing a bunch of videos here. Will Russia attack Europe, etc.? And will Russia attack Europe after Ukraine again? Blah blah blah. So there is a lot of fear mongering from all kinds of media sources going on where essentially we're afraid that Russia will attack like the three Baltic states again, potentially Finland, the rest of Europe outright, blah, blah, blah. See, looming war, it just goes on. A whole heap of nonsense, and I'll show you why it's nonsense. Nothing I don't know already, but this would make for a good astrological video. You can see a chart here for yourself. Would Russia ever invade the Baltics, etc.? The question here is, would Russia ever invade. I called it here the Baltics, but the question is longer, but it didn't fit. In any case, the full question is, would Russia ever invade all former Soviet territories in Eastern Europe? So not just the Baltics, but also Poland, Belarus, you name it, all the other countries that used to fall under the Soviet Union back when the Soviet Union still existed. And would Russia ever occupy these countries, such as just like with Ukraine and so on? And if so, what would happen? If not, what would happen? And it just goes on. And the answer is nothing I don't know already. Now, there is not a lot to say. I'm just going to keep it really short. I'm asking the question here, and I'm represented by Mercury. So I'm here in the fourth house, and the fourth house represents essentially everyone that isn't Russia, essentially an ally in this case, a hypothetical ally, because this is a neutral topic. So yeah. In any case, this simply stands for all non-Russian aforementioned countries and territories, and the 10th house represents Russia. Now, midheaven, so the 10th house cusp is ruled by Venus. Individualistically, Russia is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter is in its fifth house in Cancer. And again, I am the question asker, and all the aforementioned non Russian countries are represented by Mercury. Me and uh, me and those countries, and vice versa. Now, the fact that midheaven is ruled by Taurus, that already tells you pretty much what the motivation is in terms of any kind of so-called invasions or thingy or military aggression from Russia in terms of occupation and whatnot. It means that they're focused on resources, okay? The Russians, it's about resources for Putin's regime. And it just builds further on that. Uranus is in Gemini, going retrograde. I'll explain the retrogrades later. For now, you don't have to worry about them. I'll elaborate on them later. You also have Setna, you have the asteroid Setna, and at Mythos, you have the Pot of Fortune, all in Gemini, and you have the asteroid thingy as well, Hygeia in Cancer. Now, all the things you see in Gemini, specifically Uranus, stand for the fact that they're looking for wealth, like I said earlier, and that is purely due to of a terrestrial nature, essentially precious metals and minerals, mainly minerals, for example, uranium and or related things that simply are wealth-wise or income-wise sustainable for a long time. We're talking about decades. And then you have Setna and Admetos, which simply stands for the fact that that's what these guys want. That's what the Russian regime wants. And the pot of fortune being in Gemini simply stands for the fact that they're focused on improving daily life and overall quality in Russia as a whole as things stand for further prosperity and whatnot. All the retrogrades you see here simply stand for the fact that none of the aforementioned countries that used to be part of the Soviet Union, excluding Russia, have any of these things. Specifically, all the countries that I mentioned. Okay, so exclude Ukraine. We're talking about the Baltics, Poland, Belarus, etc., etc. There is nothing. That's why the only planet here is Uranus. and Uranus is conjunct midheaven. The rest is just asteroids. No offense to the asteroids, but they're of a hypothetical lesser nature. And the pot of fortune is a calculator point. It's not a planet. It's not a celestial body. And last but not least, Hygeia, also an asteroid, simply stands for, see, that's why it's in Cancer. It simply stands for the focus being on terrestrial resources, wealth, true terrestrial resources, specifically of the aforementioned nature, like I mentioned, uranium and the likes. Okay, things that you use to create technical components out of and whatnot. So not the default, gold, gold, copper, silver, blah blah blah. No, none of those things. It's not the main focus at the very least. That's why there is a heavy emphasis laid on Gemini. So the rest you don't see anything else. Individualistically, see? Russia represented by Jupiter. Jupiter is in Cancer, same thing, the same thing I just said, and it's in their fifth house, the house ruled by Leo from their perspective. The focus is on everything I said. That's why Jupiter is perfectly sextile, positively aspected, separated only by 45 minutes. And it's also semi-sextile, the pot of fortune, separated by 20 minutes. So, yeah, the answer speaks for itself. So, no, because there is nothing. The answer is already a big no. Russia will never invade the Baltics, etc., because there is nothing to be had. None of the other countries have anything that even would make it even remotely worth the trouble based on what they are focused on. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you can see for yourself here all the aforementioned countries I mentioned, the Baltic states, Poland, Belarus, all the other countries essentially excluding Ukraine, mainly the countries that are EU member states and part of NATO and so on and so forth. Okay, and the ones that are vehemently against any kind of Russian aggression, you name it. See for yourself, Mars and Mercury are strong, quite strong at that. Mars is at its strongest because it's in Scorpio and it's conjunct the fourth house cusp and it's also conjunct the asteroid Poseidon, although it's off by like a minute, a couple of minutes. It is fully conjunct Selene though. Those two are in the third house. Now, what all of this means alone, Mars being so strong, stands for the sheer strength of all these countries, especially combined. And that's why you're seeing that, for example, Mars is like perfectly opposed midheaven, separated only by 34 minutes. This stands for the military power and arsenal of all the aforementioned countries that I brought up or mentioned again. It would be suicide, honestly. Attacking an EU or a member state or a NATO member state is just suicide because it's like kicking a hornet's nest. All the bees and wasps are going to attack you, and even one of the most powerful militaries in the world, so the Russians, even they can't stand against that kind of aggression, let alone from multiple angles or sides. It's just suicide. And again, like I said earlier, there is nothing to begin with. For what? There is nothing. There is nothing to gain. The Russian regime has nothing to gain. Putin's regime has nothing to gain from, even if they wanted to. There is nothing there to begin with. And for the rest, yeah, it just goes on. Mercury says the same thing in terms of attitude and mentality. And for the rest, we see four asteroids, three of which are in Sagittarius, and the last one is in Capricorn. Juno, what do you call it again? Vesta, yeah, Vesta. Juno, Vesta, and Astrea are all in Sagittarius. This simply stands for the attitude of the population in these territories, and that there are still, although it's a minority in general, there are still a couple of people that harbor resentment, especially the elderly, against the Soviets, and they view the Russians as, in a certain way as the Soviets, which would lead to like extra levels of aggression, um, like some kind of vendetta movement, if you will. And for the rest, Apollon, Cupido, sorry, not Apollon, Cupido. Cupido is in Capricorn, which simply stands for the fact that again, I'll just call it the coalition, the non-Russian coalition, if you will, also has like a couple of tricks up their sleeve that would again further prevent any of this from happening. So there you see it for yourself. I hope if anyone especially old people, that act on emotion. It's just laughable fear mongering. That's all. Fear is an emotion after all. Because any logical person knows that no way in hell that this is happening even remotely for exactly the reasons I explained. Now you're simply seeing it logically explained from an esoteric perspective or vantage point. So shit ain't happening. So all of you can relax, everyone in Eastern Europe. Nothing is happening. Okay? He's not gonna do shit. Period. You can relax. Just chill. Okay, if anything, anyone in Eastern Europe, listen, you need to show your grandmother this because she's afraid that Putin is going to invade. You can show her this, even if she doesn't understand it. The message is clear. You can just fucking relax. Shit ain't happening. This is nothing I wasn't aware of already, but I simply said to myself it would make for a good astrological chart. Goodbye.